Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Outspoken Samantha. So, in case you haven't heard, Candace Owens has spoken out against Trump as she strongly disagrees with his administration's recent demands of Harvard University, claiming that he is now anti-free speech and she can no longer support him. Of course, this has stirred things up online, and the left is cheering because they think that she has switched sides and they're taking this as an I told you so moment. As for me, I just think Candace is sounding more and more insane each day, but we're going to get into all of this and you can decide for yourself. But before we do, please hit the thumbs up button on this video and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I appreciate you so much for doing both of those things. So yes, it seems as though Candace Owens has turned her back on the Trump administration. And to give you an idea of what we're going to be responding to today, have a listen to about 30 seconds of this clip.
I never thought that I would see a day where I would be rooting for a university above Donald J. Trump and his administration. But I don't recognize his administration right now. I don't recognize what's happening. I have a theory. I do. We were kicking around some theories earlier, me and the team, and we were going, how could Trump be such a free speech enthusiast and allowing these things to happen? Going after college universities, trying to suppress speech, while pretending that you're not suppressing speech, while pretending that you're fighting DEI. It's so messy. It's so obvious. Everyone knows what you're doing.
Now, we're going to listen to more of what she has to say about this in a minute, but let's get into the issue that she is responding to. So, as we know, one of the promises made by Trump when he was campaigning was to eradicate DEI practices from American society, especially when it comes to public education. And people voted for this, and because we've seen how damaging the effects of these policies have been, and sane people have woken up to the realization that DEI is legalized racism and discrimination. Plain and simple, that's what it is. So, in that vein, on April 11th, 2025, the Trump administration sent a letter to Harvard University, one of the most well-known, prominent, and effective liberal indoctrination camps. And the letter had a list of demands to be met in order for the university to continue receiving federal funding. To summarize some of these points, it basically says the leadership needs to do more to keep campus political activism under control and not let these activist students basically run the institution, and to keep the focus on education and not activism. They've got merit-based hiring and admissions, admission reform to screen international students for beliefs of a deep-rooted hatred for America, viewpoint diversity in admissions and in hiring, because we all know by now that these universities bolster and reward far left ideologies, and the more extreme and depraved you are, the higher the grade that you will get. Whereas if you're centrist or you lean to the right to any degree, you'll be penalized and likely failed, and also targeted with bullying and harassment by fellow students and faculty as well. So Trump is saying, hey, champions of diversity, how about standing for real diversity and equal opportunity and letting people have different opinions on your campuses? So those were the basic standard DEI requests in this letter. But what Candace really seems to be upset about are the requests surrounding the threats and violence toward Jewish students that have been carried out under the guise of free speech and political activism. And it seems to be her position that the chaos and terror that we saw these pro-Hamas groups on college campus engage in against their Jewish peers is totally fine. These pro-Hamas students, they're just kids. They're allowed to barricade Jewish students in libraries and chase them around on campus and shout chants about the genocide of all Jews across the world and create college-sponsored clubs that fuel more of the hate toward Jews that they just spent 2 hours learning from their anti-Semitic professor. It's free speech, man. So I want to read specifically what the letter says, and this is what she is referencing. So this part, it says, reforming programs with egregious records of anti-Semitism or other bias. By August 2025, the university shall commission an external party which shall satisfy the federal government as to its competence and good faith to audit those programs and departments that most fuel anti-Semitic harassment or reflect ideological capture. So the first paragraph is just listing all of the departments that it wants to have audited, and then it says the report of the external party shall include information as to individual faculty members who discriminated against Jewish or Israeli students or incited students to violate Harvard's rules following October 7th, and the university and federal government will cooperate to determine appropriate sanctions for those faculty members within the bounds of academic freedom and the First Amendment. The report of the external party shall be submitted to university leadership and the federal government no later than the end of 2025, and reforms undertaken to repair the problems. This audit shall be performed and the same steps taken to make repairs every year during the period in which reforms are being implemented, which shall be at least until the end of 2028. So basically, they want a report of the curriculum that these kids were being taught that fostered this blatant hate toward Jewish people. And two, they want accountability for the actions by faculty that fueled this hostility. And they want consequences for things that do not fall under academic freedom or are not protected by the First Amendment. In other words, not consequences for student or staff who were simply exercising their First Amendment rights or their free speech, because people are allowed to say whatever they want, even if it's depraved and inhumane. They're talking about repercussions for turning a blind eye to this violence, for encouraging these attacks against Jewish students with their words, or by failing to step in when they knew that these students were in danger. We want to know who stood back and let this happen and encouraged it to happen, how they utterly failed at their jobs as so-called educators. And then there's this demand, which Candace also seems to be upset about. It says Harvard must adopt a new policy on student groups or clubs that forbids the recognition and funding of or provision of accommodations to any student group or club that endorses or promotes criminal activity, illegal violence, or illegal harassment, invites non-students onto campus who regularly violate campus rules, or acts as a front for a student club that has been banned from campus. And then down here it says, in particular, Harvard must end support and recognition of those student groups or clubs that engaged in anti-Semitic activity since October 7th, 2023, including the Harvard Palestine Solidarity Committee, Harvard Graduates Students for Palestine, Law Students for Palestine, Students for Justice in Palestine, and the National Lawyers Guild, and discipline and render ineligible the officers and active members of those student organizations. So basically, this is saying that you cannot allow or fund student groups that promote criminal activity, illegal violence, or illegal harassment. Then she's upset that the Trump administration is saying if you want federal funding, you cannot have clubs on campus that support terrorist groups or where students meet to encourage hate and violence toward fellow students of the Jewish faith. They can do it on their own time, but it cannot be associated with the school if you want to have the support of the funding of taxpayers who do not want their students to go to school and learn to hate any group of people. With that said, I want to look at the more extended version of what Candace was saying, not just the 1-minute clip. I've got 4 minutes here that I want to respond to. This is directly from her channel, and I'll link the episode in the comments if you want to go and watch the whole thing. But let's hear a little bit about what she's talking about.
Gotta tell you guys, I never thought that I would see a day where I would be rooting for a university above Donald J. Trump and his administration. But I don't recognize his administration right now. I don't recognize what's happening. I have a theory. I do. We were kicking around some theories earlier, me and the team, and we were going, how could Trump be such a free speech enthusiast and allowing these things to happen, going after college universities, trying to suppress speech, while pretending that you're not suppressing speech, while pretending that you're fighting DEI. It's so messy. It's so obvious. Everyone knows what you're doing. People who are still trying to grift, I suppose, are not willing to challenge you on this, which is ridiculous, because when you are out of office, we are going to have to live with these consequences. Our children are going to have to grow up in this America. Okay. So when you threaten our speech, it's not worth it so that we can have pom-poms and go hurrah for a couple of years, then go, okay, well, yeah, now it kind of stinks because, we're getting arrested for wrongthink. We got David Friedman. Yeah, arrest them. Arrest Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. Get them. I love it.
So to this point, I get what she's saying. We know that the left has been censoring speech for years, pretending that what they're really doing is fighting against hate speech, when in reality, they are silencing people who expose their depraved anti-American beliefs, which are primarily people on the right, though Bill Maher has been doing a great job recently of exposing his own party for their insanity. But there is a legitimate concern that when we're setting a precedent for what clubs can and cannot be held on campus and what can and cannot be taught or encouraged, like maybe chanting for the genocide of Jews, or like the Columbia University professor that said that Jews dying in Israel brought him joy, that when the left comes back into power, though can't for the life of me understand how anybody could vote for these people again, but it will likely happen. They'll use our own position against us and to their benefit to silence us again and perhaps prevent other religious groups or, expressions of the Christian faith on campus, or use it to go after conservative voices more aggressively than they already have. And that absolutely will happen. However, do we avoid making moral policy decisions because we don't want the most depraved people among us to abuse it in the future? Or do we do what is right regardless of what the retaliation might be in the future from these evil, soulless people, and bolster morality and what is right now while we can? So you guys, let me know what you think on that, but let's continue.
See what's happening left and right. So to give you the background, obviously after October 7th, there were tons of student protests all across the nation. Some got violent, some didn't. But what has happened is people started demanding that universities start, taking on their own sorts of definitions for anti-Semitism, particularly the IHRA new updated definition of anti-Semitism. Harvard received notice that they had to comply with the Trump administration's demands, okay, and essentially telling them how they would have to change things on campus. And they're, again, the administration is trying to paint this as they're coming and fighting DEI on campus, and they're not doing that. I'm going to show you it so you can see it with your own eyes. On Monday, Harvard became the first university to openly defy the Trump administration as it demanded sweeping changes to limit activism on campus. Activism is like synonymous with campus, okay?
I just had to stop it right there. That's what we don't want. We don't want activism to be synonymous with campuses. This has been devastating to college students who are now saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt that they can't pay back because they spent 4 years at a liberal university that focused more on activism than education. But it's interesting how she glosses over that so quickly, like we should just accept it, and we don't have the right as taxpayers who are providing funding to these institutions to say that this needs to stop. Get back to education.
The university frames the government's demands as a threat not only to the Ivy League school, but to the autonomy that the Supreme Court has long granted American universities. They said in a quote, "The university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights." That's what the university lawyers said on Monday. They continued, "Neither Harvard nor any other private university can allow itself to be taken over by the federal government." The federal government says it's freezing more than $2.2 billion in grants and $60 million in contracts to Harvard unless, essentially, we are going to hold your funding unless you comply with these demands. And I'm going to show you, because Harvard has released it, what they're asking them to do. First, I should tell you they've already complied with adopting the IRHA definition of anti-Semitism, which is ridiculous. But how you have to read this is everywhere, and Skylar, if you don't mind making that a little bigger for me, everywhere that you see the word anti-Semitism, you have to ask yourself what the definition, the new definition of anti-Semitism is, because now we're at critique of Israel, the foreign state, essentially.
So this is where I want to stop and just dig in a little bit, because Candace has characterized this as basically just banning the open criticism of Israel and insinuating that the Trump administration is in favor of silencing speech on campuses that says anything negative about Jewish people. But her framing it that way is in line with her non-anti-Semitic stances these days, because she insists that she's not, while repeatedly blaming Israel for everything. And in this video, she goes on to say that the reason Trump is making this specific move is because Bibi Netanyahu is really the president of the United States and Trump doesn't really know what's going on. So I looked into what she is saying. I asked Grok. Grok is amazing. I said, has the Trump administration adopted the IRHA definition of anti-Semitism? And it said, yes, the Trump administration is using the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. It does say that the administration maintains its focus is on addressing anti-Semitic harassment and violence, particularly in response to incidents following the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attacks. So it says that, yes, he's adopted this stance. And I said, okay, what is the IRHA definition of anti-Semitism? Summarize some of these points. It says, calling for the killing or the harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or extremist view of religion, dehumanizing Jewish people, accusing all Jewish people of being responsible for crimes or wrongdoings that were committed by an individual or group of people just because they share the same religion. Kind of like with Germans. We wouldn't walk around calling all German people schmazis because there were schmazis in their ancestry any more than we do anything really stupid like calling all white people slave owners just because a few of our white ancestors had slaves. It also includes things like denying the Holocaust or attacking Jewish people in America for what's happening in Israel. That's the anti-Semitism that Candace Owens is referring to. But what she's leaving out is how this policy is to be applied. You can't include in your curriculum Holocaust denial or calling for harm against Jewish people, and you can't have school-sponsored clubs on campus that embolden these things as well. They're not saying that students can't have these beliefs or say what they want to say. But also, if we nip these insane teachings in the bud, you're going to have a lot fewer students on these campuses with these hateful ideas and who want to act out so violently and who want to create these clubs because they won't have these hostile teachings as part of their lessons and ingrained into them. So they won't feel the need to act on it. And that's the whole point. But Candace takes this whole thing completely out into left field when she then frames this entire effort as really being about being against Israel and targeting people who are against Israel's policies. She says that the Trump administration is just pretending that this is about DEI, but really it's just about targeting anyone who disagrees with Israel. So let's get into what she has to say about this.
The discontinuation of DEI, which would be a good thing, saying that we want people to be merit-based and to let go of DEI-based policies, that would be a great thing because that is how the nation should run. They are actually asking them to reform programs that have egregious records of anti-Semitism or other biases, telling them to look at specific programs. Scroll down, Skylar, because I want to get to them essentially just framing this as them needing to take a look at who they're even allowing to come to Harvard on foreign visas and whether or not they disagree with Israel's policies. Like you have to adopt new policies about student groups or clubs that forbid or endorse certain activities. They're talking about student groups that did not get violent, but are opposed to Israel's agenda, which is totally fair because this country is not Israel. It's not Israel. You are totally allowed to critique Israel. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense. It's telling them that these people need to be suspended, that they can't be allowed on campus. Again, making us think that Bibi Netanyahu must be the president of the United States, and Trump has no idea what's going on.
This is so incredibly dishonest to me. Framing these groups that, again, targeted, attacked, and threatened Jewish students on campus, barricaded them in classrooms and libraries, blocked these kids from walking across campus. There was even a gal that got stabbed in the eye with a flagpole. These kids were begging for help. These Jewish students were begging for help, and their faculty and staff not only turned a blind eye, but they encouraged a lot of it, and the Democrats supported it. To say this is about silencing groups who are against Israel's policies is diagnosable insanity. There were interviews of these students. Most of them didn't even know why they were there. They didn't know what they were protesting. They have no idea what Israel's policies are. That is the craziest take. Maybe this is why Jordan Peterson recently indirectly referred to Candace Owens as a psychopath. Her take on this is giving keeping sexually graphic books out of school is anti-free speech vibes. Standing in favor of these pro-terrorist groups on campuses and arguing that cracking down on them is unconstitutional is the same as these people who argue that taking graphic material out of kids' classrooms is attacking the First Amendment. It's exactly the same message. She is taking what the Trump administration is actually doing and twisting it because of her own anti-Semitic views. The same way that people who want LGBTQ propaganda in elementary school twist the issue and make it sound dangerous to do so because it's the same as book banning. In reality, these ideas are not harmless and they do not belong in public education. Just like we've seen trans ideology explode in young people because kids are surrounded by it in their woke teacher's classroom who plasters pride flags everywhere and has kids march around the hall with rainbow flags and celebrate drag queens and answer inappropriate questions on their homework assignments. The anti-Semitism exploded across America because it was being spread everywhere through the faculty and allowing these groups to grow and to gain traction. You have to pull the tree that's providing the rotten fruit out by the roots before it continues to make people sick. And it's insane to insinuate that these requests made by the Trump administration isn't doing anything to benefit any other students. All it's doing is provide special treatment to Jewish students, because the whole thing is about DEI and keeping any student from facing this level of discrimination. For me, I had no idea that anti-Semitism ran this deep in our universities until these protests. And when it was happening, I'm like, oh, this is not just about the beliefs of a few students. They are actually being taught to hate Jewish people, and anti-Semitic professors and politicians are creating an army of anti-Jewish activists to target these people here and overseas to do the work for them of eradicating this entire population. It was very eye-opening and shocking. For the record, I don't want any teaching in any education system that teaches you to hate any group, regardless of their skin color, background, or religion. The last administration absolutely refused to do anything about it, and they refused to condemn it. And this is where the Trump administration has stepped in and said, this is not okay anymore. The last thing I want to say is there are a lot of people online who are saying that we're going after Candace for criticizing Trump because that's not allowed in MAGA. And that's not true at all. You can absolutely disagree with Trump. I want people to call out Trump when he's wrong. And you might think that he's right on this or wrong on this. I'd love to hear whether you agree with it or disagree with it in the comments below. Let's absolutely hash it out. I want to hear both the accomplishments and the failures of this administration. And I love listening to people who have different takes on every single issue. I don't want to get stuck in a pro-Trump echo chamber. People are criticizing Candace because she seems to have jumped off a cliff and landed on a pile of extreme leftists. And they're criticizing her not because she's speaking out against Trump, but because they think she's completely wrong in her assessment of this situation. And she's inviting her extremely massive fan base to take the same anti-Trump position based on a twisted view of what's really going on. And that's the problem. She's taking a page out of the leftist liberal media playbook. She is focusing on this one thing that she wants us to believe about a particular group of people, making sure that we know how evil Israel is. And that's the lens that she's using for almost every single thing that she talks about these days, while simultaneously insisting that she's not anti-Semitic. Anyway, I would love to hear all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Do you agree with Candace? Do you disagree with her? Do you agree with Trump or disagree with him? I want to hear all of the thoughts below. Please, again, hit the like button on this video and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I am trying to grow this channel. Other than that, keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one.